Alright, we're back with a few more new releases from this year as we continue forward. So, let's start with Flight Risk, the new Mark Wahlberg movie that Mel Gibson directed, which it was it was a long time after I knew of this movie's existence that I realized it was Mel Gibson's next directorial effort after Hacksaw Ridge. It's been that long. And well, not just the length of time, but the to think that this follows up Hacksaw Ridge is very interesting when you look at the kind of movie it is and the quality, I guess you could say. It's interesting. So I did think going into this, like, I was optimistic because it kind of gave me the vibe it was going to be like a, and I don't watch like trailers or TV spots or anything, so I had a vague idea of like what it was. And so just based on that, I was thinking it would kind of be like this sort of throwback thriller of sorts. And that's something that was kind of appealing to me. And so I was kind of optimistic and excited going into this, especially because I didn't know that Wahlberg was playing a villain, but I felt like I had an idea that he did. Did not realize it was this kind of villain, which is, we'll get to that. But yeah, despite all of that optimism and all the stuff that sounded really cool, this opening did give a different vibe than what I was thinking. And I imagine probably a lot of other people were thinking also. Starting with, Topher Grace being confronted at his window by a very CGI animated moose, I guess. Because he's hiding out in Alaska, I think. And so this is where we introduce this particular character who is setting off what the plot is. And it's a lot of kind of jarring comedic moments. And it really takes an effort for a movie to be jarring with its tone in the first scene, because nothing's been established yet to sort of pull you out of some sort of reality you might have already set your mind up for. So to be jarred out of a feeling before it's even started was confusing and and a little I don't know, bewildering, I guess. But yeah, so Topher Grace is a comedic character through the whole thing, like not just in this opening scene or in some, casual comedy relief way where like he'll try to say something funny or do something funny at various points when there's like tension building or something tense has just happened and you follow it up. It's just kind of a constant line of this character trying out funny lines and funny things, and it wasn't particularly working for me, especially in this opening scene when it's kind of relentless. Because we have just the general, like, scared nature of him, which I guess is intended to be comedic in itself. But then there is a moment that, could have been effective, where we think maybe a gun or an explosion has gone off, and it was just his noodles in the microwave that we saw him heating. And his response is, like, it's chicken noodle or something like that. I don't know. And then he's thrown onto the bedspread to be arrested, and he's commenting on how crusty the bedspread is. And then we end on a I have to go to the bathroom while I'm handcuffed joke that we've seen I don't know how many times. Probably the 70s or 80s were probably the first ones to get to it. And it's been consistent in, mid-level action movies ever since. But what's wild about that is our transition to the title screen. But, typically an action movie or a thriller will have, like, this really immediately grabs your attention scene or moment, and then you get the title across the screen all dramatic. Yeah, it literally goes from Topher Grace making the "hey, I gotta take a piss but my hands are cuffed" joke, and Flight Risk dramatically takes the screen. So that was just a weird vibe to set up everything else that's about to happen. So, and you could say, it was like a warning, or, or at least kind of consistent, because it never really stops with this character, and this character's in the whole movie. I don't know. I just wasn't gelling with the idea, because here's the thing. The reason that I think one would want to go in this direction with this character is because there is going to be a level of camp throughout this movie. It's even especially when we meet our villain and he's revealed more and more as the character that he truly is. And the layers of just how psychotic he is just keep being unraveled. And it's like so over the top, and it's such an almost ludicrous premise that it makes sense to just, right at the top say, we're just gonna go completely comedic, like right away, because of how campy it is. But I think that works so much better if you're totally straight-faced about it. Like if Grace had been on the level of camp that Wahlberg is the whole movie, we probably could have had something. But it just still somehow feels tonally off, and the character is just kind of annoying. Which sucks because I love Topher Grace, and I feel like he could have totally done a character like this right. But this movie didn't really open up any of those opportunities, so this is what we end up with. And then, talking about the concept, where it is it's almost like kind of Red Eye vibes, where we're on the one location, but obviously the plane now is significantly smaller, and we have significantly less characters. Just our three main ones, with Michelle Dockery being the woman that's bringing Topher Grace in and has to end up sort of taking control of this situation once we realize who Wahlberg is, which is pretty early on. So then that's where our thriller element is, and it's a good idea for like a claustrophobic psychological thriller, because it's a small space to be in with a psychotic person who's the only person that can really fly this plane without help, and there's nowhere to go. You're in a plane. Like, yeah, it could be seen as a ludicrous setup, but it also could totally work. Like, all the elements are here to trap our lead characters with a psychopath. So, the problem, it feels like it, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it didn't jump off on the right foot with that opening scene where it's like, let's just be comedic for a whole scene right away before we do anything to really set up the thriller element. I feel like if you had really built this up well in its first 10 minutes or so before they're on the plane, I think this could have worked out a lot better. But with the way there's not really any tension built up, once we're on the plane and that's like the rest of the movie, it does feel like it feels less like a claustrophobic psychological thriller and more like just one scene that's just going for a really long time. And it's because, like, with a thriller and with a setup like this, you should be sort of anticipating. And it feels more like we're waiting. And obviously that it's a very thin line between those two words, but it's like if you're anticipating something, it's like you sense like, a danger's happening, or something intense is going to happen, or something's going to blow up in a really big way, and you're kind of on edge. Whereas just waiting is just that. Like, you're just like, I assume something's going to happen. I don't... and you're just kind of waiting for things to take off without a sense of, like, anticipation. So that's a huge problem for a movie like this. So obviously, to talk about the one thing the movie like really has going for it, that it did go all in on, that you kind of wish the movie could have matched in all the other aspects, is what Wahlberg's doing. And of course, it's a swing for the fences. and I imagine people will probably think it's, too camp, or it's too dumb or something, or too over the top. But here's the thing, is I really like Mark Wahlberg, and I hear a lot of comments all the time about how, he's not a great actor, he always plays the same thing, he's bland, he's wooden, whatever. I just don't get that at all. I feel like he's capable of so many things, whether it be like comedy or drama or action or whatever it is. Scary villains like, Fear. There's plenty, like, I don't get the Wahlberg hate, and there's a lot of it. And I don't, but like even the movies that like he did that stupid Kevin Hart movie like a couple of years ago. Even in that, you could sense he was like fully committed and was like giving it some sort of injection of life. And so I'm all on board when he's able to do something like this, where he wants to do the shaved head or the half shaved head, whatever you call it, and then just go all in on how like ridiculously evil, like so over the top evil this guy is. Whether it be the accent or the things that he's saying, he's like constantly sexually harassing Topher Grace the whole movie. And just his little threats here and there, and saying like what he's done and what he's gonna do, and he's practically salivating, and it's like this is totally like you can't tell me Mark Wahlberg is boring. Especially, and apparently he's been wanting to do the shaved head thing for a long time. Apparently he wanted Dignam in The Departed to have this haircut, but it was and I could actually see that. And Scorsese was like, and we'll go for something else. And Gibson was like, oh yeah, let's do that. So like Gibson was more receptive to it. So I don't know. This is like, and here, okay. Now that I've said all that, and now that I've praised that element of the movie, here's where the movie fucks it up again. This is where the life of the movie is. Like Michelle Dockery, I guess, is doing what she can with what she has, which is not a lot. And obviously Topher Grace is being led down the wrong path with what he needs to do. So we've only got really Wahlberg to depend on. Because the action isn't really like... Yeah, they have some near misses in the mountains a few times, what you would expect, basically. Nothing that's gonna, make you jump out of your seat. So it's basically all on Wahlberg's shoulders to go all in. And he's doing that. But the problem is that it's pretty early in the movie when Dockery is able to restrain him. So you have this character and this performance being basically the only life the movie has, and you literally physically restrain it. When it's already like, we're already in a small location, one location that we can't escape from, and you literally subdue him and cuff him to a wall, and that's where he is for most of the movie. And that feels like such a waste because he's not just physically restrained, a lot of the time he's also unconscious. So it's like, even when he's, cuffed to the wall and he's awake, he can still try to bring life into the movie. But no, he's unconscious a lot too. So it's like you're really dismantling the secret weapon that you have, which is, let's advertise this as a Mark Wahlberg action movie. And when they go to see it, they're going to get this character instead of what they might be expecting. I'm not sure how much the ads show, but I'm pretty sure it's out there that he is playing a villain. But I've noticed when I see like banner ads or like the poster come up, they have expertly hidden the baldness. Like he looks like regular Mark Wahlberg on the poster because it cuts off right here at the top, which is great. So it's even kind of dramatically revealed, where his hat like slowly comes off during a fight scene, or a struggle. So I said, there's like everything is here that needs to be, but it's like it just sort of keeps backing itself into these corners and taking out and taking away all the things that would make it so much better and so much more memorable. So it's like there is something fun in here, but they keep sort of shooting themselves in the foot, which is unfortunate. With stuff like there's multiple jokes about shitting your pants in a movie like this. I don't know. And I also feel like when you're talking about, doing something like this cinematically, where even in the, confined location, it's still a plane going through, like, snowy mountains. There's still something to do. And there's, action going on occasionally. There would totally be something with visual flair you could do here. And I mean, it's Mel Gibson, the guy that made Braveheart and Apocalypto and Hacksaw Ridge. And so when you see it, it's like, you may have noticed that Mel Gibson has been living in straight-to-streaming land for a while. I haven't seen pretty much any of those movies, but they're always popping up on like Tubi and stuff like that. And it's like I'm not really interested in this. And I don't know if like being in like so many straight to streaming movies has sort of tainted his vision, like his sort of epic vision that he once had as a director. Like it's so, I said this at the beginning, but it cannot be said enough how confused I am that this is a follow-up to Hacksaw Ridge. I could have sworn there was like one that he directed or two that he directed that I just missed. That might have been in that straight streaming area, but no, this is the first movie he has directed since Hacksaw Ridge. And I'm so confused how that's possible. But yeah, it feels like there's something cinematic here, but you can sense a sort of straight to streaming like scope. And that has nothing to even do with the setting, because you can still do something with that. But that doesn't really come through here. And if you want to get nitpicky, it's just one of those things where stakes are continuously disappearing. It's one of those cases where Wahlberg could be here and Michelle Dockery could be right here and only behind the pilot's seat, and he's shooting directly at her and she's just not getting hit. Like she's not, like he might as well be firing blanks at her. In character in the movie, just firing blanks at her is what it comes like. So that kind of stuff is, you know, it once that stuff comes in late when you've already kind of checked out, it sticks out more. Because I try not to be that, you know, nitpicky person when it comes to stuff like that. It's like, especially with a movie like this, it's like this is one of those just run with it movies. But like I said, when it gets off on such the wrong foot, that's gonna throw it off in a way that's really hard to recover from, regardless of how much fun you have along the way. But then again, like I said, they keep taking the fun and literally handcuffing it to a wall or knocking it out. So, yeah, what I'm saying is, if you are interested in seeing, like, this Wahlberg, it's still worth seeing if you're just curious of how he handles a role like this. Or if you're like me also, where you think Wahlberg's kind of pretty underrated as an actor and does more sort of exciting things than he gets credit for. Yeah, it's a lot. It's so many lost opportunities though, which is unfortunate. So that's pretty much how I feel about that one. So we can go on to Den of Thieves 2. Pantera is the subtitle. I imagine most people are wondering if that has anything to do with the band. Does not appear to. So it's... But here's the thing. I mean, it does come up. I want to say it's like the name of an operation or something. Or maybe a location. I actually don't remember, but it did come... It's one of those things where you're watching a movie like this, and a lot of words are coming up on screen to say where we are or what it is or whatever, and it's like, that stuff just doesn't register. It's like you could just watch the movie as they go from location and do certain things, and you'll get it as you go. And it's like the words hardly mean anything, but that's how the title fits in, I guess. So the thing about this, I guess I should mention first, is that I wasn't really enthusiastic. I did a review of the first movie when it came out, and I wasn't that enthusiastic about it. I think I was just talking about how it kind of felt cliche and generic, and like the studio wanted an Antoine Fuqua movie and couldn't get him, so this guy tried to basically, you know, masquerade as Antoine Fuqua and pass it off. The guy is the writer and director, so he's clearly passionate about this story and has a lot of ideas up his sleeve because he wants this to be like a whole franchise, that's continuing to move along, like as we speak. So it does have that going for it. So here's the thing: is like maybe a couple of years or a few years down the road, it doesn't feel like it was that long. Maybe it was around pandemic time. Maybe I started hearing a lot of positive feedback on the first movie. Like, its reputation started to really get, like, sort of, like, took off at some point. And I remember hearing that from people, like, individual people, like, not just online comments, and it was like, really? Like, Den of Thieves, like, that Den of Thieves? Like, Gerard Butler, 50 Cent Den of Thieves? That's the movie you're raving? Okay, that's random. And this has continued. And obviously has now gotten us to this point of this movie existing, and further movies apparently existing. So, obviously, I went back and I watched the first movie again before this. I feel like I had to. And I get it now. Because when I do these, not to kind of defeat the purpose of me doing this right now, but it is like, you do watch it from a different mindset when you know you're doing like a video like this, where you know you have to have things to discuss about the movie. Whereas if you're just watching a movie like by yourself on streaming or something, you can just sort of watch it and it's a different vibe. The way the way most people in the world watch movies. So yeah, so watching it that way, it was like, okay, I think I get it. It's still, generic. It's still very discount heat. It's still like, I do get the appeal, though, as it goes. Yeah, so going into this one, now with that mindset and feeling kinder to the first movie, I did find there's a lot of things about this movie that are really interesting, given that it's not just a sequel, but in the genre that it's in. Because when you imagine a movie like Den of Thieves getting a sequel, the image in your head is probably like, oh, they're going to go bigger, and it's going to be a lot more action-heavy, probably a little less character-driven, and just that whole thing. And it's going to be messier and more bloated, because both movies, obviously, are quite long, especially for what they are. I think they're about 220 each. I think they're about the same runtime. Which for a movie like this is a lot. There's a reason Heat was 3 hours. And you can get the sense that this is trying to do that, with its kind of splitting up its character work, and then what the job is, and then the execution of the job, and then the aftermath. That was the structure of the first movie. It's also basically the structure of this movie, but despite basically having the exact same structure, because there's always going to be a reveal at the end too in the aftermath, is what we're setting up here now. But what's interesting is that it also still feels like a different movie in its approach, especially with when we are reintroduced to Butler. He was already, in kind of a bad place in his personal life in the first movie. So here, we now see him, at the end of his rope. There's the moment that really sets his character up well, where he's at mentally, when the air dryer in the bathroom doesn't work, and it just sets him off. Because, that was, the last thing, where it's okay, that's it, I'm fucking going off now. And, all the stuff that came before that. And so, it also helps to show him at the end of his rope because of a decision that he makes, which takes this movie in a totally other direction than the first movie. Like I said, despite having the same structure. Where, typically, when we have in this particular scenario, obviously there's a lot of gray area with both characters, in a sense. In the sense of, discussing a movie without confining it too much. Essentially, there is a good guy and a bad guy. There is a cop and a criminal. And that's our setup with Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr. So, it was Pablo Schreiber in the first movie, and then it was revealed, of course, that O'Shea Jackson Jr. was the mastermind. So now we have established who our cop and who our criminal is. And so now it comes down to, okay, so now Butler's going to go after him for good. Now, in this particular scenario, typically, if there was a turning around of one character, more often than not, usually annoyingly and lazily so, from a writing standpoint, it's the bad guy will come over to the good guys and help them do something against another bad guy. A worse bad guy. So, to have Butler be the character to say, you know what, fuck this. Yeah, with everything that's led up to this, and everything that's going on with the cops right now, fuck it, I want in on what you're doing instead. And to have that turn instead, that's a really fun setup and a really good way to go. And kind of the perfect trajectory for, you can so imagine, it's Gerard Butler, is born for this kind of part. So, and to kind of be in this gray area, and that we can kind of see a turning point. And it's a little rough. For a movie that's this long, his turn is pretty rushed. Things fall into place. But once that takes off, and then we get into that, then the movie kind of becomes what it's good at. which is, you know, the whole planning a job thing. But when he falls in with this crew, there's one character in particular that's interesting because she seems like the one that's like kind of in charge. And when we hear her voice at first and we see the way everything's playing out, she comes off like she's gonna be like the new big bad villain. That O'Shea Jackson Jr. is just gonna kind of work for. So it's weird to say his name like fast. But so what's interesting about her coming off like the big bad villain is the fact that, and this might sound bad, but she almost kind of ends up becoming a love interest to Butler's character. And normally it'd be like, well, that's fucking stupid. He doesn't really need a love interest, and that's just going to add more things to this movie to make it a bit more bloated when it could be a little smoother and tighter as it runs. But it's like, to set her up as somebody that seemed like she was going to be like a big bad, I did find it interesting. Unless that was me jumping to conclusions that weren't intended to be there. But in her first couple of scenes, I took her as a future like big bad character they'd have to go after. So to see her become that role was interesting, but it doesn't really sacrifice anything to her character as much as it might sound. But so I did find that more interesting than I typically would have, given the way it was set up and the way the characters are set up. So there is that. I mean, there are still cases where she's a bit annoying, like this scene that seems like it was written by a 14 or 15-year-old, where she shows off how tough she is by saying fuck a lot. So every now and then we have to deal with something like that, but it's surprisingly, I don't think that really came back, so there's that at least. But yeah, so as far as dealing with a similarly structured movie as the first movie, but still kind of throwing that in, like the new stuff in to kind of shake it up a little bit, I also like that it just didn't seem like it was trying to outdo itself. Like, when you do a sequel like this, it's almost like you do bigger things just for the sake of being able to, like, because you can. It's like because the studio believes in you more now because you're a sequel. And it never feels like that. Like, not even once does it feel like that. Like, it's trying to outdo itself or go bigger just for the sake of it. So that's something I really appreciated about this also. I will say something that probably could have strengthened this movie a lot was I guess a better crew, or a more engaging crew. Because we did have, I mean, once again, you could say it's, you know, a bit bloated and doesn't add a whole lot to what's going on here, but just that little bit of character stuff we were doing in the first movie, like with, what was it, 50 Cent's daughter had like a boyfriend come over or something and they all intimidated him or something, and just to show like a human side to them. Something we've, you know, seen before. It's, you know, Marcus and Mike Lowry going after Reggie that first time. It's that thing. But there was still something about them that felt more human than this crew kind of feels like they're just sort of, like they're just the crew and that's about it. Like, maybe every now and then there's a moment in there, but it doesn't stick. At least to me it didn't. So that's probably something that this could have benefited from. But also at the same time, it's like, it's hard to decide what you want out of a movie like this when it comes to this much character stuff, because if you have the character stuff, there is more weight when the action scenes get here and the climax breaks out and bodies might start dropping. But at the same time, it's like, this could be a much tighter movie also, and something that feels much more like it's, you know, on the move. And it's like, which one would probably work better for these? I think it works fine in the first movie. I think this one maybe could have benefited more from cutting it down and being just a bit more straightforward and more about, like, specifically the job and then the climax and the aftermath and all that. Because there is, like, a big chase scene, there's a big, you know, gunfight, and it's very well executed action, which is something that the first movie was quite known for, which is really funny too, because of how well this movie, like, builds up to that. Like, it's not, like, in a hurry to get to the action, like a lot of these movies would be, especially sequels like this, where it's almost like there's an expectation. But it's like, no, we're just gonna take our time and show you everything that we want to show you and show all the meticulous ways this plot is unfolding. And and then we'll get to the big action and we'll pay it off. And I like that it has the patience to do that. So I do really appreciate that, even if I think this one might have benefited from being sort of cut down, especially character-wise, because we do have the buddy thing going on with Butler and Jackson now. And like there is the nice moment where they're like abandoned in the ocean and they have to swim back to shore, and you get there's an actual real build to how they sort of become friendly as we're going into this job. So it's still one of those things though that does feel like you can see, you know, the fingerprints of all these other things on it. Like the first movie, it's like, oh, I like this, but it feels an awful lot like this, and so on. So I will say I like how sort of old-fashioned it feels too. I think that's something that comes from the pacing, where it's like it doesn't feel like something that's in a big damn hurry like everything else is now. There's something very old-fashioned about the way it takes its time and gets to know itself, and we get to know it, and then it does all the big stuff. But it does suffer a little bit. Both of these movies suffer a little bit, where I think they'd be a lot better if they had more of a distinguishable voice of their own. So, and I don't mind, you know, being able to see influence or being inspired or saying like this movie meets this movie or whatever. I don't have any problems with that. But it does feel like I would love to see what these movies are like with just a little bit more of their own thing. So, but I mean, as they are, they're perfectly fine. Certainly would exceed expectations of what you might expect a movie like this, you know, might come out as from a director that's not like, I mean, he's a talented director, but I mean, if you're going to compare him to like, you know, Michael Mann or something, but he's still, you know, like I think the first movie was his debut, so he hasn't done a lot. So to be like this accomplished and execute the action this well with only like a couple of movies under his belt, that's something. So it's like if you're gonna compare him to Mann, that's just completely unfair to him. So so I try not to do that by any means, but yeah, it's as he goes further in his career, it would be interesting to see him sort of find his like we always have the Lee Whannell conversation, like we had the last video with Wolfman, where it's like when Lee Whannell started out, it was like he was just doing James Wan, and it's like he just needed to sort of find his way as a director and get comfortable in that job. Then he really found like his own style and his own voice. So I'd be interested to see what happens when this director finds like a real voice of his own and starts to like his movies start. You start watching his movies and you don't start comparing them to other movies or saying that you see other movies in them. So that's something I'm rooting for him. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's finish on Back in Action. So. Now we get to go to Netflix land. If you want to talk about generic and shit you've seen before and stuff that's just has no real purpose for existing. It is an interesting title because both actors in this are kind of back in action after being away. We had Cameron Diaz, who's sort of semi-retired for like a decade, is now back, and Jamie Foxx, of course, after his health. He had already shot this before his stroke, but he has this feeling now that he's like back. So there's something about that that's kind of nice, I guess. And this is their third movie together, so they've done 3 movies together, and they're all completely fucking different. So that's something. But then you realize you're watching a Netflix action comedy. And it is exactly what you expect it to be at every single possible turn, and not in a good way. I feel like I've bashed generic Netflix movies for so long on this channel, and it does become very redundant, and you know you get tired of saying the same thing over and over again. But you're also watching the same thing over and over and over again. But most people, when they turn on Netflix, are looking at their phones anyway, so they don't even notice. And Netflix knows that you do that, and that's why they make this stuff. So we've had this conversation so many times, and obviously nothing has really changed. So we get stuff that you'd expect. They're spies, but they're also a couple. Eventually they're a married couple, they have children, and so they do spy things while they're acting like a married couple. It's that old thing. It's, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is in here, Spy Kids is in here, all that stuff. So, and it's just very, very Netflix. Just in appearance, in the execution, in the writing, just everything is all... And it's like, the beginning of this movie basically felt like Lift, we talked about last year, the Kevin Hart plane movie. The whole beginning of it just feels like Lift. And then we get to the climax. The climax feels like the second murder mystery movie? Kind of feels like that. Just always deja vu. Just constant deja vu whenever you watch a Netflix movie, especially one like this. A lot of aimless comedy dialogue, especially at the beginning. Like, you have people that just have really made perfect livings out of perfect comedic delivery of perfectly comedic lines. Like Jamie Foxx and Cameron Diaz. This is what they do. This is their thing. And when you give them nothing, we just talked about this with Flight Risk. If you give somebody that knows what they do, they can do it well, and you give them nothing, they will try, because they are professional and they can do this, but at the end of the day it will be empty, because you didn't give them anything. So we have moments here that are just comedy, in quotes, lines back and forth, that are just like the only comedy in these lines is in the delivery. Like, it's a completely empty, humorless line, but it's delivered in a way that's almost like trying to trick you into thinking it's some funny or clever line, but it's like, you're not fucking saying anything. You're putting those inflections on it, sure, but you're not fucking saying anything. So that's basically what a lot of the dialogue is, especially the, oh, we're a married couple, but aren't we, whatever. And they throw in a mother-daughter, like, subplot thing going on here, where the daughter's a teenager, so she doesn't like the mom, and the mom's just trying to, win her approval and be cool or whatever. Nothing. It's just absolutely nothing. And yes, I feel like I don't even have to tell you. I feel like it goes without saying. Of course, there will be a scene in this movie where people sing in a car. Because all these movies have these filler scenes where people sing in a car. Because, oh, it's light, it's happy, it's feel-good. This is what people in feel-good movies do. They sing in the car. And this plays out for a couple of minutes to kind of just continue that runtime going. It's already almost 2 hours. You didn't need filler, but you put it in there anyway to kind of try to trick people into thinking that you had something going on that that was enjoyable in some way. But it's not really working out. And what a colossal waste of the rest of these actors. Not only is it a total waste of Fox and Diaz, that goes without saying, but I mean, we got Kyle Chandler in here, we've got Andrew Scott in here, we've got Glenn Close in here. I mean, Jesus Christ, look at this cast. You've got Kyle Chandler as the boss that is introduced twice and then abruptly shot, which, means absolutely nothing. We're never going to see that character again. We also have Andrew Scott here dealing with the MacGuffin that they're chasing around. And Andrew Scott's basically just walking around on the phone. Andrew fucking Scott is just walking around saying bland lines into a phone. That is a crime against humanity. I mean, yeah, you can throw out the term, you wasted your actor. Like, that's just an easy term to throw around. This is wasting an actor that's of a certain caliber in a way I haven't seen in a long time. Then I felt like you kind of expect him to be like, the twist villain or something. I think he's intended to be a red herring, but it's like, give him something. Even if he's a red herring, give him something. Make him seem like a red herring more than just an occasional glance that looks a tiny, tiny bit suspicious, or just the fact that he's Andrew Scott makes him suspicious. And it's like, oh, well, surely he will have more to do. He's Andrew Scott. In a movie like this, they are definitely going to give him more to do later. No. And Glenn Close just played a part like this in Brothers, if anybody saw that. The one with Peter Dinklage and Josh Brolin. Basically the same thing here, only she's like a criminal in that, and she's like, you know, a spy in this or something, or a former spy in this. And so she does all the actiony stuff at the very end, and she works into the whole mother-daughter plot thing in very obvious ways, and it's just, yeah. And you would think, by the way, just talking about chemistry, there's no chemistry between anybody anywhere, despite all these capable actors. But I mean, it comes back to the mystery of Fox and Diaz not having much going on here, because this is their, like I said, this is their third movie together, and you know, you'd think there would have been something on the press. The press tour, they seem to have fine chemistry, but I mean, I guess it's very hard to do when you have Netflix material. So I guess you can't really blame too much on them. But you also have Seth Gordon here. And when I saw his name, it was like, what, the Horrible Bosses guy? Okay, so there's got to be something here. I mean, obviously he and Fox have a history, a winning history. You know, you have, you know, the both creators of Motherfucker Jones here. There's got to be something you can do with that. But then I was like, what else has he done besides Horrible Bosses? And I looked again, and it goes Horrible Bosses, Identity Thief, Baywatch. And it's like, oh, this movie suddenly makes a lot more sense. Not in a good way, but it makes sense now. So that's a lot. Identity Thief and Baywatch. Yeah, even it's Baywatch's climax. If I'm remembering Baywatch's climax correctly, also aesthetically looks an awful lot like this one. So, and also like pretty much every other generic Netflix action movie. So, there's that. And then, of course, naturally, because Netflix is Netflix, and they will surely get away with this, and enough people will put this on in the background and ignore it, that they will continue. They will make another one. So we get not one but two pieces of sequel bait. So, however they deliver on that, I guess will remain to be seen. But like I said, since I'm sure enough people put this on in the background and just let it run, they will see their big numbers and they will say, all right, let's do this again. And it'll probably be something that looks exactly like this, with apparently another actor. One of the teases is, oh, you thought my mom was bad. Wait till you meet my dad. Credits. And so that's what Back in Action was. Like I said, probably exactly what you expected it to be. So, there's that. It's interesting, though. I feel like being nicer to it than I am right now, because it wasn't, like, miserable watching it. Like, I'm only... Like, talking about it now is the maddest I've been at it. So... and that's, like... And I rarely, like, get mad at movies anymore. So this isn't even really what that is. It's just, like... Yep, it's just more of this. With actors that we love... doing things that we don't love. So it's like there's almost a little glimmer of, well, at least it has this. So so yeah, it gathered up this cast, I guess. So that's what we're left with. So I think the next thing we're going to talk about is probably Companion, and I know there's something else, and I'm blanking on it, but I guess you'll find out when that happens. And so, and we've got more awards stuff coming, so we're going to try and keep on track with this and all of that. So until all that other stuff, I think that's it.